All right, so today we're going deep on something I bet you haven't thought much about before.
Yeah.
X-ray waste.
Definitely not a common dinner table topic.
Right, but that's what we do here. We dive into these kind of unexpected areas. And joining me today for this deep dive, we have our expert.
Always happy to dig into the hidden world of waste.
Okay, so to get us started, we are looking at some materials from GIC Medical Waste Disposal. I'd never heard of them before, but apparently they are the folks to call for all your X-ray waste needs.
They're definitely carving out a niche in a necessary field.
That's for sure. And, I was thinking, why should anyone even care about this? Like, unless you work at a hospital or something, why is X-ray waste something we need to think about?
That's a fair point, but it gets at a bigger issue, right? It's about how we handle potentially dangerous materials. That's something that affects everyone, not just healthcare workers.
Okay, that's a good point. So when we say X-ray waste, what are we even talking about? Is it literally just the X-ray films themselves, or what?
It's actually a lot more than just those images. We're talking the films themselves, yeah, but also the chemicals used in developing them, developer, fixer, that kind of thing.
Ah, right, because those aren't exactly environmentally friendly.
Not at all. And here's a fun fact. Some older X-ray films actually contain silver,
Wait, silver? As in the precious metal?
the one and only. They use silver halide in the film emulsion because it's sensitive to X-rays.
Wow. See, I would never have thought of that.
Most people don't. But it means we can't just toss these films in the trash. Silver is a heavy metal. If it ends up in a landfill, it can leach into the groundwater and cause contamination.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So suddenly we're not just talking about old pictures anymore. This is legit environmental stuff.
Exactly. And that's where companies like GIC come in, because they specialize in this very specific type of disposal.
Right. They kept using the phrase, what was it? Specialized disposal. What makes it so special? Like, why can't this stuff just go with the regular medical waste?
It all comes down to understanding the specific hazards. X-ray waste can release all sorts of nasty chemicals into the environment if it's not handled correctly. We're talking soil contamination, water contamination, the whole 9 yards. And depending on the type of X-ray, you might even be dealing with low-level radioactivity. Yeah, not something you want to mess with. Definitely not good for us, not good for the planet.
So there's like a whole other level of thinking that goes into this then. Like most of us just assume it's all taken care of, but there's this whole process happening behind the scenes.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it's more complicated than people realize. And that's where GIC is really trying to highlight their expertise, because they know how to navigate this whole world of regulations and hazards.
Yeah, they talk a lot about regulatory adherence. What kind of regulations are we even talking about here?
Oh, they're incredibly strict, as they should be, given what we're dealing with. We're talking EPA regulations, state-level environmental agencies, all sorts of guidelines on how to collect, store, transport, and dispose of everything properly.
So it's not even just about knowing what the rules are. It's about keeping up with any changes, too.
Oh, absolutely. It's a constantly evolving field. And with those kinds of regulations, it's no wonder healthcare facilities rely on companies like GIC to handle it all. Let them focus on patients.
Makes sense. You don't want your doctor distracted by waste disposal regulations.
Exactly. Let the experts handle the dirty work.
And speaking of handling things, GIC, they also make a big deal about being eco-friendly, which, okay, that's a popular term these days, but what's that actually mean when we're talking about X-ray waste?
Yeah, it's definitely not just a buzzword in this case. There's actually a lot they can do to make the disposal process more environmentally sound. For example, they mentioned they can recover silver from used X-ray film.
They can get the silver back out. I did not know that.
Yeah. Pretty cool, right? So not only are they keeping that silver out of the environment, but they're also reducing the need to mine new silver, which can be really damaging ecologically. It's a win-win.
So it's like a recycling program, but for heavy metals.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just the silver. They also talk about minimizing waste volume, using less toxic processing chemicals where they can, that sort of thing.
So really looking at the entire process to reduce the impact.
Exactly. Every little bit helps. And that's actually where their whole thing about customized service plans comes in.
Oh, right. They mentioned that.
Because different facilities have different needs. Like a small dental practice is going to generate a different kind of X-ray waste than a huge hospital system, right?
Makes sense.
And the type of equipment they use plays a role too. So GIC takes all that into account when designing their services.
Okay, so it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Definitely not. Speaking of the process, I was actually kind of curious to see how they actually, do it all.
Me too. They have that whole section, process overview. They break it down into like collecting the waste, then processing it safely, and then the disposal part.
Right, and they keep saying safe processing. I wonder what's so potentially dangerous about it that they need these, like, advanced methods?
Yeah, what are we talking about here? Like people in hazmat suits.
Uh-huh. Probably not quite that dramatic, although, I mean, depending on the specific type of waste, they probably do have strict safety protocols in place, to protect the workers and the environment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like they probably use special equipment, to minimize their exposure to the chemicals or any radiation.
Right. Makes sense.
It's all got to be carefully controlled.
And then there's the final step, the actual disposal part. What does environmentally responsible disposal even look like for X-ray waste?
Well, again, it depends. Some stuff they might be able to treat to neutralize any harmful chemicals before it's disposed of.
Ah, so like detoxifying it.
Exactly. And then if there's anything with low-level radioactivity, that might have to be shipped off to a specialized facility, one that's equipped to handle that kind of stuff.
It's a whole hidden world, isn't it? Like we just don't think about where this stuff goes.
Exactly. It's kind of amazing when you stop and think about it.
It really is. Oh, one other thing. I know we don't want to bore everyone with regulations, but I was looking at their FAQs, and they get a lot of questions about how they make sure they're following all the rules all the time.
Right, because like we were saying earlier, it's not just about knowing the rules, it's about keeping up with all the changes.
Exactly.
They probably have a whole team of like compliance experts whose job it is to stay on top of all the latest from the EPA, the state agencies, all of it,
So they're like professional rule followers.
pretty much.
Uh,
That's got to be a tough job, honestly, because things change so quickly.
yeah, for sure. Oh, you know what else I thought was interesting? The part about those special containers they use. Like, are we talking full-on biohazard bins here?
It's possible. I mean, some X-ray waste could be considered biohazardous, depending on what else it's been in contact with.
Uh-huh.
But they probably have a range of containers they use, each one designed for different types of waste.
Yeah, so even the garbage has to be sorted properly.
Exactly. Gotta love a good system.
Right. And it seems like GIC, they're all about having that system in place. The right containers, the right disposal methods, the knowledge to make sure they're doing it all by the book.
They're really positioning themselves as the experts in X-ray waste management.
It's wild, right? Like we go about our lives and we never even think about this whole other world that's running behind the scenes.
It's like a hidden city, keeping everything clean and safe.
Totally. So as we wrap up our deep dive into X-ray waste, what's your biggest takeaway? Anything surprise you?
Honestly, it's just a good reminder that even the things we take for granted, like getting an X-ray,
Mm-hmm.
have these like massive systems behind them.
It's easy to forget about that. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it makes you appreciate all the work that goes into keeping those systems running smoothly and safely.
For sure. Especially when there's so much at stake with the environment and everything.
Right. You got to have the right people on the job who know what they're doing.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, a huge thanks to you for joining us for this deep dive into the surprisingly complex world of X-ray waste.
My pleasure.
And to all our listeners, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into a topic you probably haven't thought much about, but definitely should. Until then, stay curious.